Let me start by thanking the conference organizers for including me, and as an adjunct, my husband. But I'm the only lawyer who was invited to participate, and that presents a great honor to me. And I'm also the only comparativist here. The rest of you folks are generally scholars of China in particular and East Asia more generally. And so I don't speak fluent Chinese, as everybody knows. Right? Jen, you and I were on a panel together last year. So in order to do my work, which includes having produced this wonderful book, I have had to have a lot of research assistance from a lot of different Chinese scholars and research assistants that have been employed through the Catholic University of America. For those of you who wonder about things like this, the reason I am now a research professor, which is what's indicated in the bios, is that I have now retired. And as of August 20th, in other words, very soon, I am no longer gainfully employed by the Catholic University of America, although I do have a set of benefits. So Lee and I will be moving to China as soon as our male dog, moving to Shuni, because we have two large horses. As soon as our male dog completes a course of chemotherapy at the Animal Medical Center in New York City. And that will be in January, so we'll move sometime after that. I did mention earlier the fact that I'm a comparativist and that Lee and I have been working on these issues in various places, including China. It's really been going on since the early 1990s, in China since 1995. We now have an NGO, and I'm going to put this up on the board because it provides you with access to resources that some of you may not know about, including a Chinese language website for the organization, and it's called in English the International Center for Civil Society Law, in Chinese the International Center for Charity Sector Law. And it's both in English. You can toggle in between the English and the Chinese. We are in the process of organizing the site better in Chinese. It takes a long time because a lot of things have to be translated. But we are inviting Chinese scholars to submit content for publication on the website, and there will be more that will be appearing. The interesting thing about this book is called Civil Society in China. And I think it's tremendously important to use the term, and I believe I demonstrated that it's true throughout history, that there is a historical relationship. And you can all see the beautiful cover with this wonderful calligraphy of Hui. But this book was out of date 4 days after it was published. It was published on the 27th of March, and on the 31st of March, and this is the segue into my paper, on the 31st of March, the State Council announced on its plan, published in Xinhua, that it was going to complete by the end of this year a new set of national level regulations. Now, unlike Sean, I am not skeptical that these will come out. I think when the State Council says it's going to do it, it is going to do it, but we have a little bit of a disagreement about that. Furthermore, and I detailed this in the paper, I know, I'll believe it when I see it too, but the major reason why I have to wait to revise this book and have it come out in paperback and be translated into Chinese is that it's now out of date, which is absurd and crazy, but it is. And so I have to wait till I get to China. The new regulations will come out. There will be implementing regulations. I want to do some research, some field research to see what's actually happening. But the reality is, as I detail in the paper, I believe, unlike Sean, that the new regulations are in fact going to permit. One of the great things about this book is that there are going to be some significant disagreements, is that the new regulations will in fact permit several different types of NGOs to directly register, and this is the national level regulations. As I said previously, at the local level, let's just use the example of Guangdong. They are currently permitted to directly register, the 4 different types. But the 4 different types, if we just boil down the categories, one is the trade associations and other related types. A second is charity and public benefit organizations. A third is public services organizations. And a fourth is scientific research organizations, including social science research. Now, what those terms will actually mean, as you know, as a lawyer, I know that the implementing regulations will help define that. That the regulations, and I know you addressed this in your paper, Jen, that you don't know until the implementing regulations actually come out what the terms mean. But I believe that they will come out and that they will, in fact, be adopted by the end of the year. The other thing that's going to happen, and this was just recently announced in July of this summer, that, and Lilia Guo was at the meeting in Yunnan, and Wang Jiangjun, the new Director General of the NPO or NGO or whatever you want to call it, Management Bureau, also was there, and he announced it, that there will be new rules for foreign organizations, again, to be completed by the end of 2013. And my supposition, just from reading between the lines, I have yet to verify it. I happened to have been in Beijing at the time, but was unable to sit down with the appropriate officials at the ministry. They were very, very busy, just to sort of precisely get what they're going to contain. But as many of you know, in Yunnan right now, there's something called a Bei'an procedure for the recognition of the foreign organizations in Yunnan. I believe the new national regulations will be based on the Yunnan regulations. The China Daily Report suggests that they will be. And so that now there will be a national level policy for recognition of foreign NGOs. But we'll see. Again, you don't know. So that's the current status of the what I believe will happen by the end of the year. We have to wait and see, but I believe it will happen. And Sean and I should make a bet, because we'll see who's right about this. Okay, I'm going to skip over some of the rest of my paper about outsourcing, because I believe that the paper that's done by Jessica and Marta will address these issues, and will address these issues very, very specifically with reference to some case studies. And I also believe that it's important to say at this point that I disagree a little bit with what Tim has said about the ability of the state to address some of these issues. I think outsourcing is definitely going to be required. I don't think that need is going to go away. But let me talk about the final thing in the paper, because I think this is a really important aspect of what's happening right now. And that's the relationship of the whole social management policy, Sean mentioned it earlier, to the notion that we're going to downsize the state, we're going to create more capacity in the NPO, CSO, whatever you want to call it, sector. That is a tremendously important trend in China. And it is one that, as far as I'm concerned, having worked in China since 1995, we are witnessing it as time goes on, and we're witnessing the loosening of the ties of the state to the civil society more and more, of course, through direct registration. But here there is a little bit of cause for concern. I recently received an email from Pei Bin. Now, I assume a lot of you know who Pei Bin is. Pei Bin is our oldest friend in China. She was at the Ministry of Civil Affairs, and if you read the preface to the book, you will see her name mentioned very prominently. And she was at the Ministry of Civil Affairs when we first went there in 1995. She was working as a translator. She later became a policy analyst, moved on to the Asia Foundation, moved on from there to Business for Social Responsibility, and now has the delightful job of being a major manager at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. She's a real watcher of what's going on in the sector. And she said some recent research, which I have not seen and need to verify, but I want to mention it at this point. She said that with respect to this whole social management, the need for NGOs or CSOs to become involved in social management, a recent study suggests that there is more of a re-governmentalizing at the local level, local and provincial level, of social organizations. Remember, we've always talked about, and Carolyn will be presenting about the China Youth Development Foundation, whether it's a Gongo or a Gengo. But Peibin says the dangerous trend is that as part of social management, there's a re-governmentalizing of the local level social organizations. And as I say, I need to see the study, I need to verify that. But Peibin says it very much concerns her, because she has a broader vision of civil society. Even though she came from the government, she has a very broad vision of civil society in China, and she really wants to see the sector expand and become less government controlled. I also believe, and this is something that Jessica and Marta should explore in their paper, I also believe that it is related to the whole idea of outsourcing. That once you get outsourcing into the mix, then the notion that you want to retain more control over the NGOs through a variety of different means, such as by making sure that you have a government person in the governing board of the provincially or locally registered NGO, then the two trends, the whole social management and the outsourcing, come into play together. Furthermore, as part of this, we all know there's the whole Xie Danwei reform. And this whole process of reforming the Xie Danwei has been going on for some time. It's something that I have been on panels talking about in Beijing for quite some time, beginning with a conference that was run by the Ministry of Science and Technology in the mid to late 2000s. And the process of Xie Danwei reform is really ramping up. As you may know, the Xie Danwei reform movement now has a whole procedure that's been set out by the government, and this state council office or state commission office for public sector reform, referred to as SCOPSR, is having a conference, which I'm going to be speaking at in Beijing in September 2013. And the way I conclude the paper, it's just not a conclusion, it basically says, I will know more about the impact of this Xie Danwei reform, state downsizing, on this particular trend after I attend the conference. At this point, my knowledge of what's actually going to be happening is at a level of generality that I don't feel comfortable with as a researcher. But hopefully after that conference, I will be able to have a better contribution in my chapter on this particular subject to the book. So that's all I have to say. And by truncating my presentation, I hope I leave more time for the discussion. Thank you very much. And if anybody would like to see this, I will circulate it if you haven't seen the book yet.